All right, guys, you are here. It is Thursday, June 28th, and it is Warrior Leadership time. I am super excited that you are here. If you are on a phone or if you're live here right now, please make sure that you mute yourself so that we don't have any background noise, because we definitely want to hear from our guest speaker. Now, our guest speaker doesn't need to mute himself, so that's okay. But I'm super excited that you're here. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rear Admiral Paul Becker, U.S. Navy, retired. That's right. And I love the Navy guys because I was in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy. My grandpa was in the Navy. I know there's a couple of flyboys that join our call and some jarheads and some Army guys and stuff, but that's okay. We all serve for one purpose, and that's to protect the USA. All right. And so Rear Admiral Becker is a leader's leader who has served around the world and has been decorated in peace, crisis, and combat. The Naval Intelligence Community even took the extraordinary step of naming a leadership award in his honor. All right. Naming an award in his honor. That's huge. Compliments. That's like highest respect in the military. And then since leaving the Navy 2 years ago in 2016, Paul, or Rear Admiral Becker, as I call him, has established the successful Becker T3 group. Now, what is T3? T3 stands for teamwork, tone, and tenacity. All right, and that's a business consultancy and platform for his motivational keynote speeches to businesses and healthcare audiences. Rear Admiral Becker's presentations focus on applying T3 principles to, one, help overcome extreme adversity. He's a stage 4 cancer survivor. That's huge. And two, improve corporation performance, productivity, and profit. Now, I know a lot of you guys are super excited to hear him speak. I know I am, and I've seen him speak before. So how do we do this online? Instead of giving you a standing ovation, Rear Admiral Becker, we kind of do the waves so that you can see everybody waving at you and their excitement. So welcome to the call.
Thank you, Kent. Great to be with you this early evening, little middle of the evening for me.
Definitely. So now I have seen you speak on stage, and I know you definitely have a presence when you're standing on stage. You have a presence when people are just standing around you, and I believe that's because of your leadership skills. And I know you like to talk a lot about that, and the people that are on this call right now are people that want to step up. They want to become a better leader for their family, for their businesses, and for their teams. So I was just wondering if you would mind sharing some information on the leadership, or even just sharing your story about leadership and overcoming obstacles like, stage 4 cancer, and how you overcame that as a leader.
You bet. And thanks for noticing the energy, because it takes a lot of energy to lead. I mean, there are different types of leaders. There are cerebral, thoughtful leaders, but to really inspire and motivate large, high-performing teams, it takes energy. And leaders have to generate their own morale, right? Leaders can't go to someone else and say, I'm having a down day. No, others come to a leader and typically say, I'm having a down day. What do you recommend? Or how can we get the most out of what we're facing? So thanks for noticing that along the way, Ken. And that's why I think we flock together, not just former Navy men, but I sensed your energy and enthusiasm as well. And just like in sports, you can't teach height in some, and you can't teach speed in others. I don't think you can teach enthusiasm about a task, but I think you can teach leadership. I believe leaders are taught, that they're not born. I mean, some people have more innate skills than others, but it's a continuous process of improvement. And you can get help from a lot of directions, from people senior to you, from your peers and family, from people junior to you. So leaders are learners, and they're listeners, right? And they absorb all this information. And before one can be a leader or even talk about leadership, I think they need to start by being a good follower and being a good teammate. And then from there, you start applying the lessons you learn along the way. So what lessons did I learn along the way? Thanks for highlighting. I've served in peace, crisis, and combat. And even as a Navy man, some of that was in landlocked countries, to include Afghanistan. Right? It's about as far away from the oceans as you can get in some case. But that was the nature of joint military intelligence when I was there in 2009 and 2010. So I've been part of organizations that came to work, did their job, good management principles, no one got hurt, but nothing notable was ever accomplished, and I kept track of that mentally. Then I'd been part of organizations that were absolutely world-class, maximum energy, high-performing, overachieving teams. And I thought to myself, and everyone on this Zoom has probably thought to themselves, well, what's the difference between the good leaders and the great leaders? And what's the difference between the average performing teams that I've been a part of or the super performing teams that I've either been a part of or admired from afar? So I looked deep into that and thought about it, looked through my own notes, particularly about individual leaders at the heads of these organizations, but not just them personally, but the culture and the spirit and the atmosphere that they created within the organization. And it came down to 3 words: teamwork, tone, tenacity. Okay. So why 3? Why not 13? Because there are great leadership lists that start in the numbers of 10 or go to more than that. There are cognitive studies that show the human brain is optimized to remember things in 3s. Think about it, right? Jackson 5s, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, right? The Zoom audience can fill in the blanks. On your mark, get set, go. Ready, aim, fire. Red, white, blue, right? My wife's favorite music group, Earth, Wind, fire. Teamwork, tone, tenacity, right? It fits well. It's got some alliteration, so it's memorable. And most importantly, when it comes to leadership, which is a lot more than a slogan, it's actionable. These are 3 things that individuals can do to improve their self-performance. It's 3 things that teammates and leaders can invoke to inspire a better group performance. Okay? And what if you're not in the military, which I was for 30 years, and now I've been a successful disabled veteran business owner for a couple of years.
Those are called civilians.
Yeah, the private sector, I prefer to call it, Ken. Teamwork, tone, tenacity directly applies to the corporate pillars of performance and productivity and profit, right? Whether that's market share for some large companies, the value of the companies themselves, how you spend your time, that's important. But more than just to the military or to the private sector business, I found teamwork, tone, tenacity, I'm just going to call them T3 from here on out. They were a great framework when I ran into some personal extreme adversity. In December 2014, I considered myself on a scale of 1 to 10 at about level 10, professionally and on a personal level. I had just moved from Hawaii to the DC area. I was the director of intelligence for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. A few months earlier, I had just run the Honolulu Marathon. I was professionally ascendant and was hoping after that tour in DC, I'd go on to more accomplishments in uniform. But I had a nagging pain in my knee. I got an MRI. The doctors explained to me that they'd have to do a biopsy immediately because what they saw looked like a tumor on my right femur. So after a biopsy and an extreme number of tests over a couple of days, on December 23rd of 2014, I was told I have stage 4 multiple myeloma, or bone marrow cancer. Right? It was the unwanted, the unexpected, and the uncertain. And I wasn't expecting those 3 U's in any sense. And I needed a framework to help combat them. I mean, there was faith and family and fitness and my wife Kim by my side the whole time, but I needed a mental framework and a professional reference on how I may work with a whole bunch of new folks to overcome this. And after they told me I had stage 4 cancer, right back to that scale of 1 to 10, I thought I still had 6 stages to go until I hit the danger zone. Then the doctors explained to me, no, this isn't Letterman's top 10 list. In cancer, it only goes to stage 5. Correction, it only goes to stage 4. There is no stage 5. So I didn't at first grasp how serious it was. So I spent 2015 in various stages of repair and disrepair, multiple surgeries, some of them very sporty, where the outcome was in doubt, high-dose chemotherapy, a stem cell transplant. And by the grace of God, at the end of the year, I was in a good, stable remission, and I remain so. I continue to receive 3 times a month low-dose maintenance chemotherapy treatment. But it was a great opportunity for me to test teamwork, tone, tenacity against the greatest physical and emotional trial of my life, right? Up to this point, I'd been testing teamwork, tone, tenacity in professional situations. And I'll be a little more specific about each of the 3 T's. But it works in more than just the workplace, whether you're in the military or whether you're in the private sector. So with your permission, and everyone on Zoom, just a few thoughts on each one of the T's, and then maybe we can have a little bit more of a dialogue. So I'll start with teamwork. Teamwork's underrated important point is building relationships, right? It's incumbent upon leaders in teams to build relationships, not just within the team, but external to the team to maximize their performance, right? The goal is not the quantity of relationships that a leader develops as part of a team, right? This isn't LinkedIn or Facebook where you're counting the number of friends or contacts. It's building up the quality of relationships. Because what comes out of the quality of relationships in a team? Well, trust, right? If you have good relationships with folks, you trust them. So even if you disagree on an issue, you trust each other. Right? And once you have trust, you're loyal to each other. And you look at the Medal of Honor award citations for any awardee of our times or before then. And the one thing that they'll have in common, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, nurses, infantrymen, pilots, they were doing it for everyone else around them. They were completely loyal and trusting of the members of their teams. So you don't have to be a senior person in a team to be a leader. You can be a leader within your circle. In fact, one of the greatest bosses I ever worked for is former Army General Stan McChrystal, head of Special Operations Forces in the Middle East when I served with him. He's written a book called Team of Teams. So he takes teamwork even a step further, and he emphasizes strongly the values of trust and loyalty, the byproducts of teamwork. Okay. Then on to tone. Tone's a synonym for attitude or culture of an organization. Only I needed a T for alliteration for it to be memorable, right, and actionable. Tone is about being genuine. One thing I found is that your teammates will forgive you if you make a mistake and you're genuine about it and you're apologetic. They won't forgive you if they find out you're a phony and you try and cover it up, right? And this is in any walk of life, but these lessons are particularly acute in the military. But tone is more than that. It's setting a good example, right? Even when you have to generate your own morale, right? And I'm not talking about Ned Flanders from the Simpsons cartoon type of always cheery, right? Even when you're having a tough day, you just need to maintain an air of control and calm. I think of Apollo 13 astronaut Jim Lovell, right? You've seen the movie. He's on a spaceship. It's flying away from Earth at hundreds of miles an hour, and it's falling apart. The outlook is grim. And he finds it within his cool, calm, perfect tone demeanor to tell Houston, we have a problem. And he left it at about that, right? He didn't panic when the poo hit the fan. That's a part of tone, right? And tone's also maintaining your integrity with others. What do I mean by that? Integrity could be demonstrated in a lot of ways. To me, it's never having a say-do mismatch. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And it comes from being at work on time, right, or early, right, to a Zoom. As a small tactical example, to promising someone that you'll help them with their promotion paperwork or endorse them for a special college program. You can't control the outcome if they'll receive it or not, but if you spend the extra time and effort to really help others achieve what they want as a partner, that's setting a good tone. It's also being a good teammate, but it's setting a good tone. Okay? And then there's tenacity, which is just trying a little bit harder. It's not endurance, right? We all have endurance. Maybe most of our Zoom audience lives in greater Los Angeles, right? Endurance is just driving, on the sack of crabs known as the, Los Angeles freeway system every day. That's endurance. I don't know that that's tenacity. Tenacity is perseverance with a purpose. It's understanding what the end state is going to be and working your way backwards to achieve it. And you never accept no for an answer, or you never accept an obstacle that'll block your way. And there's some tall obstacles for all of us professionally, medically, right? So you find ways to go around them, through them, underneath them, over them. And some of the most tenacious people I've met were junior to me, right? You don't have to be senior to set a tenacious example. You just have to be willing to try harder than the next person to achieve what you're after. So that's important as well. As we get into our conversation, I'll talk about books that I'd recommend to people if you want to read a little bit more about teamwork or tone or tenacity. And some of them are real academic treatments of the topic, but some of them are real life stories of people who showed some daring do, right? And were exemplars of these 3 T's. And that's important. And then finally, for those involved with a team, I'd commend something that helps keep people focused on the 3 T's. And individuals may have different versions of the 3 T's, but it's not just an email to everybody that here's our new culture, or here's what's important and we'll focus on. Or it's not just something framed near a key doorway in your workplace that everyone walks by and typically doesn't read. What I like to share, Kent, was something I called the gold standard. This one happens to be from when I served with the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon. the last of 5 consecutive commands where I issued them. So inside, I talked about what's our mission, what's the Joint Chiefs of Staff's mission, what are our goals, and how we'll operate. And I include in there a segment on teamwork, tone, tenacity. And everybody gets a copy of what's important. And it's impossible to lose because it's on this uniquely colored piece of paper, the gold standard, right? Memorable, the mnemonic, teamwork, tone, tenacity, the gold standard. It was unclassified. So for an intelligence officer like myself, where you normally couldn't bring your work out of the office, this one you could, right? It fits neatly in your pocket if you fold it. You can't lose it on a desk full of white paper, right? You can move it in half and make it as a coaster for your warm glass of milk on your nightstand when you go to bed, right? As catch-up reading. And I could always pull it out of my jacket pocket and say, no, actually, that's not one of our goals. Our goals talk about organizing and leading tailored rapid intelligence responses, not generic slow intelligence responses, right? We're not meeting the standard. So when it came time for people's performance evaluations, either verbally at the month mark or quarterly mark, it wasn't a surprise to them at the 3-month mark or the 6 or 12-month mark. But, hey, how am I doing, boss? You're doing great. You're really hitting all the key points that we've talked about. Or we've talked many times that I keep getting emails back from other people outside our command that demonstrate, you're really exercising some surly tone. That's not what we're about here, right? We've talked about it. So it's good to have the scorecard, the reference sheet, and happy to talk about that as well. At that point, I think I've been talking for about 20 minutes or so. Maybe that's enough. And maybe you have something you'd like to ask, or we'll open it up to the Zoom and see what they'd like to talk about that I haven't yet so far.
You're doing great. I mean, I know there's a few people that want to know some of the books that you recommend as to an inspiring leader. But one of the questions I got, and I served in the military. I know there's a lot of people here that were in the military, are in the military, are spouses or family members and stuff like that. But what they don't know is, as a Rear Admiral, are you 07?
I was in military parlance in 08.
08, okay. So, literally, he is at the top. There's only 2 spots above that, 09 and 010, and that's four stars on his shoulder. However, being a Rear Admiral is a huge responsibility. You have hundreds of thousands of people under your command. And a lot of the people here on this call, work for themselves. They only have 1 person working for them or 10 people working with them. And so one of the questions I have for you, somebody that's had command of hundreds of thousands of people, what do you do when you have an oops day? Or like you said, you can't go to anybody and say, you know what, I'm having one of those poo days. How do I get out of that funk? Because you're there to lead, to guide, and make sure the mission gets done.
Yeah, it's an important point. You have to have an inner circle of folks that could really talk to you honestly, and number 1, point out to you, hey, you're exercising some bad tone today, boss. You may not realize it, but you really just, rip that guy's, head off and, down his neck. I saw you courtesy copied me on an outgoing email. I could tell something's bothering you. So it's important to have some real trusted close friends, colleagues, family members. If you have a family-run small business, that you need a tone check. And it's important to get that from trusted folks that are your peers or your juniors. if you set up an organization where you're always the sole indispensable leader and you always have the right answer, you're never going to get that kind of feedback. So, number one, you need those kind of people. Well, how do you get those? You have to show some vulnerability, even though you may be in a position of strength. And you show some strength by demonstrating a little bit of weakness, right? It's a paradox in a way. And you could tell someone in your outer office or a close colleague that we're really moving into a part of the business process that I'm not too familiar with. And the car's broke and 2 of my kids are sick. And I'm under a lot of stress right now. So I appreciate you talking to me plainly and honestly if you see I'm going off track a little bit. I bet you a lot of the Zoom audience saw a movie this past year about Winston Churchill called The Darkest Hour, right? And right before he gave one of his most stirring speeches, he talked with his wife Clementine. And she emphasized to him that you're wise, Winston, because you have doubts. And you're strong because you have imperfections. And it's okay, right, to recognize those. And for those who'd like to read a little bit more of it, I'd commend anyone, if you don't mind, I'll share my website address, right? It's all one word, the Becker T3 Group, TheBeckeR, T3GROUP.com. And I'd ask folks to follow me on Twitter and on LinkedIn and on Facebook, all the Becker T3 Group. And I put regular information out there that emphasize T3 points in everyday situations, from Magic Johnson in 1981 being asked to fill in for the injured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the center for the Los Angeles Lakers in his rookie year, NBA Finals, Game 6 against the Philadelphia 76ers. You can tell I'm a sports fan, right? I see you have a Jordan basketball jersey over your shoulder. But the rookie, Magic Johnson, didn't say, I'm too short. I don't play center. That's not in my contract. The other guys are bigger and stronger than me. No, he was a teammate. He showed tremendous tone. He played almost every minute of the game. That was tenacious. And they won, right? And they won the game and they won the championships. It was amazing. I'll never forget it. And very important, perfect example of T3 in the real world that I talk about on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter nearly every day.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that information. Now, I know one of our Zoom people here, Kim, has a question. So I'm going to unmute her so she can ask the question. So go ahead, Kim.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, Kim.
I actually just wondered if you had to do one thing differently out of your whole entire career. Could you pick just one thing? Or, a lot of people say that their mistakes or their, maybe their regrets have led to, maybe their successes. So I was just wondering if there was anything, because you've accomplished so much, just what I've heard this evening. And just kind of curious if there was one thing.
Thank you, Kim. Ken was very kind to only highlight my successes. I'm not sure an hour would have been enough to highlight my failures. In fact, I thought today about a citation from a couple of famous people. They both paraphrased it differently. The first, since I'm a naval officer, I'll cite the father of our nuclear navy, now deceased many years, but a 4-star admiral named Hyman Rickover, who said, "Success teaches nothing, only failure teaches." And then a lot of years later, there was this fictional character from the Star Wars series named Yoda, who said, "The greatest teacher failure is." So I'm not equating Yoda to Rickover, although if you look at the pictures, I'm just saying, there's a little something there. Back to what could I do different? In terms of just one specific instance, I won't share that from a tactical level. But with your permission, I'll go a little more strategic and say I wish I listened and learned more when I was a junior officer, when I was in my 20s and 30s. I was headstrong. I was loud. From the Bronx in New York, right? I came in with that kind of edge to me. I didn't want to be an intelligence officer from day one. I wanted to go to flight school, but that didn't work out. So I always worked hard, but I didn't listen and learn from some of the greats who I encountered along the way because I was too busy acting like Top Gun or Officer and a Gentleman, type antics off of work. And it's not to say I should have lived a cloistered monk professional life, but I wish I would have focused more. And somewhere later in my career, it was highlighted to me in an academic environment where for the first time I received something called 360-degree feedback, where I received evaluations, not just from my seniors, right? That's typically who evaluates your performance at work. But 360 sets it up where your juniors evaluate you or your peers evaluate you. So it's coming from every direction. And I really changed the way I listened, learned in a group environment, right? Not trying to dominate the conversation or take charge of the event. There was plenty of room for everyone to contribute. And I didn't learn about that, until maybe halfway through the first part of my career. So listen and learn more. It's almost counterintuitive. Aren't leaders supposed to be loud and at the front at times, but they know when to listen and learn as well.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So now I have a question, and I know if other people on the call have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat and we'll ask for Admiral Becker. But you had mentioned failures. Like you said, oh, well, we could go a whole hour just on the failures. And as a leader, most people want to point out your successes, but they don't realize how many failures you've had to go through to get to where you're at. All they see is the success, the award ceremony, or the big bonus checks and things like that. So you obviously have had a lot of failures. What was it that it was in your brain, or what was it that was taught to you that overcame those failures to get up and keep moving forward so that you had those successes?
Yeah. I don't mean to be trite about this, but fall back on T3. And I'll be a little more specific, right? A failure. Our team didn't, at a classified level, our team didn't perform well in one of our pre-deployment certifications. Mm-hmm. I was in charge of an intelligence team on board an aircraft carrier and a bunch of other cruisers, destroyers, frigates, submarines that were about to deploy with us. And we receive typically an evaluation from a control group off of the Southern California coast. I was stationed in San Diego at the time, right? Happy place. But before we went, you get a mark. And our mark was not strong, right? Fancy way of saying it stunk. Right, so I'll never forget the words of the evaluator in front of a room full of admirals and other senior officers. I was a commander at the time. This is in 2001. And his opening words were, "Significant discrepancies noted," which is not what you want to hear as a boss in charge of millions of dollars of equipment and a few dozen people, and you're about to go on a combat cruise in the fall of 2001, not long after 9/11. Okay, so there's a failure. But before I focused on how do we build a team, How do I demonstrate tone? Because the poo has hit the fan, right, at this point. And we have a very short time frame in which to improve, right? So I needed to be tenacious about it. My boss pulled me off to the side after the room, went about their own business, and there may have been just us two left there. And he put his arm around me, and he said, "Paul, I think you did a great job, but we got to fix some things." So how about that, right after I've just been shot in public? My boss tells me it's not as bad as that guy made it sound. So this boss made me realize that at times you can fail and not be a failure. How about that twist of English? And it's very important, right? You can fail but not be a failure. But you need someone around, to help bring that to you. So what do we need to do? Well, obviously not what we were doing before, right? That's insanity when you start just trying to tweak the same stuff. We had some pretty radical overhauls of who was in charge of certain things, how they did certain things. We increased the intensity and the timeliness of what we were doing. And we set up an evaluation for ourselves once more, an internal evaluation, to make sure that we deployed and were combat ready. And we did. Okay, so that was a failure. Here's another one where T3 came to the rescue. It was very kind that you pointed out, I made it to 2-star, Admiral. There was a time I was in the zone for selection for promotion to 1-star Admiral, and I was not selected. The Navy selection board picked someone else, right? So my first reaction wasn't, that person's way better than me. I just want to congratulate and hug and that. No, it's like, how did that happen? How could I not? How could I not? Right? So there was a little bit of self-absorption there. I think ill-placed. I'll put my faith that the Navy knew what was best for the Navy as opposed to what I knew was best for the Navy. So it was a humbling failure, okay? And not that I did anything wrong, but in retrospect, the person that was selected that year, they were the better officer than me. So how did I go about coming to that self-realization? Well, where am I in teamwork? Am I doing all I can to be a good teammate? Am I showing the trust and loyalty to others? How about my tone? Am I screaming too much? Am I running down the hallways instead of walking calmly? Am I asking people how they're doing and really meaning it? And hanging around for an answer instead of just saying, hey, how you doing? And keep walking, right? That's how you do it in the Bronx. Maybe you get a little head nod with it too, right? But if you stop and you say, hey, how are you? No, really, how are you? That's part of building a team. And then tenacity. Maybe I play a round or two less golf the next weekend and focus a little more on a Sunday to get ready to hit the ground running on Monday morning when everyone showed up in work instead of scrambling for the first few hours, which maybe I typically did at the time. Right? So repeat as above. T3 was a good framework. And I'd hardly call a surprise medical diagnosis a failure, right? It's the ultimate failure, when your body's genetic system is miswired and goes crazy on you. But T3 provided a framework for how I could get better. There's medicine, there's faith, family, fitness. I've talked about that a bit, but I needed to develop a whole new set of teammates, medical professionals. My idea of medicine for the first 30 years in the Navy was Tylenol and Motrin. Band-Aids, maybe. If it was real, if I could see the bone, I'd go to a doctor. Otherwise, little gauze pad and you muscle through. So I had to speak their language. I had to study my problem set so I could have a meaningful dialogue. So I had to build up trust and loyalty with a whole new team of medical professionals, doctors, nurses, caregivers. Tone, right? frankly, I didn't want my wife, to see me worrying too much about how this would turn out. The outcome was uncertain at several points. I think any cancer patient or family member of a cancer patient knows that. But you don't dwell on that, right? And you don't go Pollyannish, off the other end either. But I like to refer to myself as a pragmatic optimist, right? Use the science, but use your emotion, to help as well. And then there's the tenacity, and that was just doing everything I possibly could to achieve what I saw as myself as walking out that hospital with my right leg. This was one of the earliest challenges the doctor shared with me is, we don't know that you'll come out of this surgery with your right leg. We have options A through the letter D, 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of options. And A is best of all. D is we can't save your leg. It may be too far gone at this point. So I had it in my mind that one day I'd be walking out of there, and thanks to all the factors that I've talked about, I did.
That's awesome. And I think everybody on this call is going to be sleeping and dreaming about teamwork, tone, and tenacity, which is 3 T's, and that's awesome. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people as business owners, as leaders, and just people that are out there, they make excuses. They come up with excuses. They get into a funk for a month or two. As a leader, what would you tell them? Would you tell them to change their tone and get out of that funk and keep moving forward because they're going to impact somebody else's life? Or what would you say to them as a leader?
Yeah, I'd say by starting, if you're in a funk and you realize you're in a funk, start by changing your physical environment a little bit. Get out of the house at a different time of the day to go to work. Stop somewhere for a breakfast. If you normally do your physical training in the morning, do it at lunch. Try and do something different, physically different, and just try and shape what you're doing from the outside first. If you always watch a certain show at a certain time, just completely destroy your rhythm for a while to try and get yourself out of that groove. Okay. Then ask other people for help. Back to demonstrate some vulnerability. I'm in a rut. I can't figure out why. It's more than me and the people in my house, can help with. Meet a friend, right? Not for too many drinks, right? But for a cup of coffee, or a long walk, or a bike ride, or whatever, and just share some thoughts about that. I'm not going to recommend going to paid medical professionals. I don't know that's the answer for anyone, and that's beyond my expertise to share it. I'll just share experiences from when I've been in a rut, right? We all have that core group of people you can count on. We talked about it earlier at work to check your tone or your teamwork, but then there's real life. Whether it's a brother, from somewhere, across the U.S., or a high school buddy that doesn't live too far away in some part of greater L.A., reconnect, talk through it, and see if they may be able to discover the obvious. Sometimes you're so close to a problem that puts you in a rut, you don't see it yourself, right? Athletes, find this as well. Great hitters. They're in a slump, right? Right now, there's a Washington Nationals baseball player named Bryce Harper, right? They're the local team here in D.C., so I follow them. They're not my faves, because I'm a New Yorker. But, they're on TV every night, so you get to see them. So he's way below his average, and he'll snap out of it. And he's someone really needs to just spend some time with them and say, you may not notice this, Bryce, but you're dipping your elbow, on your swing, or something like that. Or in yoga class, I can't hit my hip flexor. I don't know what's going on. Have an instructor, point out to you, it's your back. Twist, about 20 degrees this way and lean forward, and you may get it. So from physical to personal contact with people that you trust, I think are the best recipes that I have discovered along the way to help get out of a bad groove.
Awesome. Good advice there. I like that. I'm actually out of questions at the moment, but I know there's some people on here. Oh, Pamela just spoke up in regards to failure. How do you recommend dealing with negative people who have been a source of criticism your whole life? And how would you respond to their criticism and the way they hold failure over your head?
Yeah. Important. Thanks, Pam. So let me start in the workplace and then get out to the whole life, right? That's a big problem to tackle. Listen, there are people in any organization, small or large, who, are not always on board with the direction that the leader wants to take a team. Okay? Some go along quietly. Some go along loudly. I call them the vicious compliers. Yeah, I'll do it, but I'm going to do my worst and, maybe we'll suffer. Well, you hold them accountable quickly, at first privately, and you say, you know what? It says right here in the organization's gold standard that our performance will be characterized by close cooperation between divisions, directorates, and other agencies. You're not doing that. It's very apparent to the other agencies and to everyone around here. Why is that? How can we go about fixing it? What do you recommend we do? Okay, start it privately. No need to call someone out publicly at the first opportunity. If it continues, right, and you're back, we'll get to the bigger issue, holding things over you your whole life. But in the workplace, listen, there were some of these people who were government civilian employees. It's very difficult to fire them, you may have heard, right? I would just minimize their positions of responsibility or authority and sideline them, right? I couldn't dock their pay. On their evaluation, I could point out that they weren't a strong performer. But I would just take them off of the projects that I valued most and that I needed strong contributors. And most times, those people realize that, wow, I've been marginalized. And I really like to contribute when it comes down to it. Right? I don't want to come here and be marginalized and ostracized that I'm not contributing to our team's effort. And they try and work their way back into the crowd, usually with a much better attitude, okay? Okay, now back to the whole life. Listen, I'm not a psychologist, and I can't admit, I have experienced all of that on a personal level. But I would just call for as much transparent contact and dialogue with the person who criticizes you and holds it over you privately, to just say as unemotionally and calmly as you can that I think this is a real problem between us. I'm trying to do A, B, and C. You keep telling me it's not good enough, and I'm, guilty of X, Y, and Z. It's become public. It's hurtful to me. It's ineffective, for us, either as a family unit, as a group. I want to get beyond it. I don't know how to do it alone. I'd rather talk to you and come up with a mutual solution than rather just be silent and fester, let it fester. I don't want to do it on email. I don't want to do it publicly. Are you willing to meet with me in person to talk about it? You know, I'm calling you on the phone, or at least I'm starting out with an email to try and arrange a meeting. And that's how I go about it. I don't know what the cascading effects could be from there if the person keeps saying, no, you're just guilty of X, Y, and Z. And maybe I don't want to keep talking, in this forum, because I don't know how that story ends. But at least there's a first step towards trying to reconcile it openly but privately, instead of letting it go public. And then there are a lot more stakes on the line when egos and reputations are out there for others to see.
Great answer. I mean, being in the military, we've all seen the people that criticize and point fingers and hold it over your head. So it happens not only in the military, but it happens at home. And thanks for that advice, because we all go through that. So I appreciate you giving that. Now, before we go, because I know we're wrapping up almost an hour. See, told you could do it. I also wanted to congratulate you, because this is your first Zoom call, and you did a great job. Like, kudos to you. Like, look at this. You can even teach a Rear Admiral new things.
Yeah, I've never been afraid to be reverse mentored. I don't know exactly how old you are, Kent. I could be old enough to be your dad. Probably just your big brother, I think, it may be more accurate. But
we'll go there.
That's a good thing about a leader. And back to Kim's earlier question, right? What would I do different? I'd be more open to listen and learning. I've never been afraid to be reverse mentored, right? Leaders don't always have to be the oldest, most experienced, most senior person in any organization. Heck, there are plenty of young civilians, petty officers, junior officers that I worked with that were absolute subject matter experts and had knowledge far superior to mine in any one area, right? But they may have been in cylinders of excellence, right? It's the job of a leader is to knock down the walls of those cylinders and create one comprehensive effort. Right? Maybe that's a difference between leadership and management. Management, you're doing the things right within your cylinder, right? An accountant accounts, right. A lawyer lawyers, an engineer engines. You get the idea. I'm probably using the wrong words there.
Well,
but how do you put it all together into a floating machine whose engine works, that is exercising the right international laws of the sea, right? There you go.
Yeah, and like Kim says, you're never too old to learn something new. And my philosophy is, and that's kind of why we created this leadership training, because just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're a good leader. Leadership is something that you learn. It's not something that's just placed upon you just because you have that title or that position. You have to step up. You have to know that, hey, I'm going to lead these people. And even if I lead them, if I walk this direction, are they going to follow me? Yeah. So I know you had mentioned at the beginning that there were some really good books that you wanted to recommend. And I just want to make sure we didn't forget that, because there are some bookworms on here that are like foaming at the mouth, just wanting to know what you read or what you recommend so that they can read this stuff as well.
You bet. From a teamwork perspective, I'll pick a book called, the author's name is John Wooden. He's deceased. He's the former coach of the UCLA Bruins basketball team. I forgot the name of his co-author, but the title of the book is A Lifetime of Lessons on and Off the Court. So in the 1960s and 70s, Coach John Wooden led the UCLA Bruins to more NCAA basketball championship teams, to championships, than any other team still in NCAA history. To include an incredible streak of, wins along the way. The book is not about playing basketball or winning championships. The book is about developing your character to the utmost and being a great teammate. And if leadership follows from that, all the better. But it's fantastic and it's very relatable. He's a Midwestern guy with Midwestern sensibilities that coached, in Los Angeles, right under the bright lights. So that's a good one in terms of team. From tone and maybe from more of an academic perspective, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership from an academic sociologist leader named John Maxwell. It's here in my office. I've got it bookmarked. I reference it all the time. It's longer than my 3 T's, but I can't remember his numbers 4 through 19, right? He has 21. Yeah. Hence, teamwork, tone, tenacity, the 3 T's are a little more memorable. And then finally, let me share 3 books of real world stories of people who put it all together, mostly tenacity, but they were great leaders along the way. The first is a book called Undaunted Courage. And it's one of the many stories about the Lewis and Clark expedition. So there are a couple of, in the early 1800s, after the U.S. purchases the Louisiana Territory, President Jefferson sends these discoverer explorers, outdoorsmen, Army folks, out to where no, at least American citizens had gone before, into the great Northwest, the Louisiana Purchase. So over the course of a couple of years, they conducted split operations, eventually reunited in the Pacific, coming back again, faced every type of hazard imaginable, from wildlife to Native Americans to weather to the unknown. I mean, they didn't have maps of where they were going. They didn't speak the languages. And they brought back every person in their team except one. And even that person just passed away of dysentery just a few weeks into the expedition. It was just an uncontrollable malady in the day, right, 100, 200 years ago when it comes down to it. So great leadership, teamwork, tone, tenacity from Lewis and Clark. Stephen Ambrose wrote the book, Undaunted Courage. Another one is called Endurance, and it's the story of the Shackleton expedition. Endurance was the name of the ship of this British explorer who in the 1800s went down to the Antarctic on a mission of scientific discovery and got ice wracked. And harrowing tale to bring his crew back safely from shipwreck in the Antarctic. Human dynamics about who to put in different tents because there were some vicious compliers, right, with his orders, to literally saving lives and being resourceful when all the chips were down. And then finally, to keep a little Navy flavor on it, Kim, there's a book called Thunder Below, and it's by Eugene Fluckey, F-L-U-C-K-E-Y.
Wasn't that a bunch of dancers?
No, not that kind of Thunder Below.
Oh, okay.
This is a story about a submarine, a diesel submarine in World War II, named the USS Barb, B-A-R-B, like the fish. And at the time, Lieutenant Commander Fluckey led the Barb on very, very dangerous patrols in the Western Pacific. His submarine sank more tonnage of enemy shipping than any other U.S. submarine, but they were particularly audacious in getting close to shore, sending men ashore on raiding parties, using their submarine cannon to fire at shore installations, and escape, luckily, but skillfully, with their lives, so they could go back and do it again when America needed that level of daring do. The skipper of that submarine, Gene Fluckey, provided it. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his efforts. And I understand Steven Spielberg's bought the rights to the book, and hopefully we'll see a movie about it one day.
Good Navy movie though, upcoming. Yay! So I wrote all these books down. It's in the chat room for everybody, so that way they don't miss the books and they can get them and everything. So I threw them in there. And then, of course, Kim had posted in there your website so that everybody can see that. I'm going to actually copy the Becker T3 group so that way everybody can follow you, get some more nuggets of wisdom throughout the day, throughout the week. Yeah, I'm super excited that you were able to come on here and share your leadership and your wisdom, and of course about teamwork, tone, and tenacity. I know that a lot of people are going to, I know there's a few of them on here that'll probably have 2 or 3 pages of notes from what you shared today.
Well, it's very kind that they'd have that many.
Now, before you go, I'm not going to let you off the hook easy. Nobody gets off the hook easy in this group.
All right.
One of the things that I do is we have a vault. We have a thing called the Success Vault. All right, and it's a vault where we put tools in. Whether it's a book, whether it's coaching and training, whether it's a program that one of the speakers has. And so we ask the speakers if they'd be willing to donate something into the Success Vault. And this is, the vault is going to be something that somebody's going to win at the end of the year to help them be successful. Oh yeah, and 3 things: family, business, and team. So would you be willing to donate to the Success Vault either a book or some coaching or something that could help somebody in those 3 areas?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, right? I'm in the process of writing my book, right? Right now, all I have is a trifold, but I don't want to donate a trifold, it's because, you'll end up reading that too quick. And I can't guarantee I'll have the book published by the end of the year. So how about this? 1 hour of coaching.
Boom.
Where I could refine. I am a certified executive coach from the International Coaching Federation.
Oh, certified coach.
Oh yeah, I'm certified.
Nice. All right. So you guys heard that? 1 hour of coaching from Rear Admiral. All right, this is the top echelon in the military, guys, and you're getting an hour of training with him. Like, I don't even get an hour of time with him, and somebody's going to get a whole hour of coaching with him.
Can't we just got an hour? Come on.
Oh, that's right. No,
but this would be tailored, right? I'd meet. Listen, I live in the greater DC, Washington, D.C. area, so it wouldn't be in person unless someone lives here, but it could be with a private Zoom, a FaceTime call, Skype, however someone wants to set.
Whoever wins, I'll connect them with you, and then it's up to you guys to either do FaceTime or Zoom or over the phone and stuff like that. But they'll get an hour of coaching with you, and to me, that's just priceless. Like, because an hour of your time is very valuable, and just from 08 in the military to get an hour of their time, usually you're getting yelled at if it's an hour of time or disciplined, but this is full-on coaching to help you in your business, for your team, or for your family. So
we're warriors in training. That would be
warriors in training.
I'm passionate, right? Why do I do this? Why didn't I sign on with a defense corporate giant? With nice and profitable, but not what I wanted to do.
Right.
I'm passionate about a couple of things. One is helping others overcome extreme adversity. I have a unique patient's perspective on that. Right. It's not from a doctor's perspective with a white lab coat and a clipboard. Right. It's from the bed up. Right. And I am passionate about improving performance, individual or organizational, my own and others, right? I believe in a bigger pie, right? Someone's improved performance doesn't come at the expense of someone's decreased performance. right? There's a virtuous cycle. I believe in that. And if one can improve, all can improve. And coaching is perfect fit that way.
That is so true, and that's awesome. So thank you, Rear Admiral Becker. I always feel weird calling you by your first name because you earned that title. I was in the military. It's just, yes sir, no sir kind of thing. So you're just Rear Admiral Becker to me. But thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom, your leadership, and thank you for implying and teaching everybody about teamwork, tone, and tenacity. I know there's some people on the call that needed a little butt kick because they're in a funk, or they just needed some advice to overcome, a family issue or whatever. But you nailed it on the head. And again, thank you so much. If you're on the call, do the wave to Rear Admiral Becker and let him know how much you appreciate him. Yay! All right. So other than that, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming back. And, we always want to have you come back and teach more because like you, I like to learn new things all the time. So if you don't mind, I will ask you later on to come back because we're going to be growing as a group. There are going to be more people on here. They're going to be newer people, and I want them to hear about teamwork, tone, and tenacity.
Thank you, Kent. The answer is yes, and we'll work out the details. Thank you, everyone.
I like this yes guy. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you next week with our next special guest, which I'm not going to tell you who it is. You're just going to have to find out. That's the fun of being in charge. So other than that, I'm going to end the Zoom. And if you want to hang out, you can. If not, rest of you go home, enjoy the rest of your evening, hit the bed, get the sleep because sleep is important. All right. And I will see you guys next week.